Okay, so we need to get this clear, right? Because even the Parliament Privileges Committees have not been given a proper account of this, right? The felony was abolished, and it was to be anything that was previously regarded as a felony would be put into the classification of a misdemeanor and treated as previously misdemeanors were treated. Not that where it says the word felony, then it shall be treated, misdemeanors shall be acted on as it says felony. No, felony is to be actually reduced into what was previously regarded as a misdemeanor. So if a misdemeanor wasn't applicable, then it would be no longer applicable. It's not the case of making it applicable. The main point here, the main point is in the Parliamentary Privileges Acts, it says a court of record. And what it means and what it meant is the Quarter Sessions and Assizes or the High Courts, right? Because they are what you call courts of record. Magistrates' courts are not a court of record. They might have records, but they're not a court of record. And when you go in there, everything that is said and spoken in the court is not recorded. So all my cases, for example, at Leicester, none of the words spoken are on record, right? There's no transcript, right? The court of record has a transcript, like in William Penn, right? And this act means court of record to mean the Quarter Sessions and Assizes, right? Now, even if it was a court of record, that means that it's saying that you can bring proceedings in any matter, whether it's civil or criminal, right, but only in a court of record. If it's not a court of record, they can't be brought during the time of Parliament. And then it's also definitely got here that they can't be arrested, the MPs, because they need to serve in Parliament. Even if you do prosecute them in a court of record, and even if the proceedings commence, they can never be under arrest. And if they're sentenced, they don't serve the sentence while they're serving in Parliament. And that is clear by this. And I want to show you something to understand this, right? Because you need to understand it, right? When, through the history of England, right, your quarter sessions, right, are 4 times a year. That's why they're called quarter sessions, okay? Now, quarter sessions are courts of record with the King's justices, right? The quarter sessions are periodical, 4 times a year, separated, right, like seasons. But you've also got, besides these courts of record, you've also got assizes. Now, there used to be, I think, two assizes, right, as well. But I think they ended up later on having 4 of them, right? But even so, for each area, there are only a limited number of sessions where they deal with a lot of the serious cases, right? These are courts of record, and then you've got your high courts in London, right? Now, anything which was not a serious offence, even civil or criminal, were dealt with by the hundreds courts, and they could be dealt with all year, any time, right? Now, we need to figure in the Parliament sessions, right? The Parliament sessions are about a year, right? They're approximately 12 months, and then you've got the gap time, right, in between them, which is like this red time here. Now, take this into account, right? If you've got minor offences, right, minor offences can be dealt with any time and all the time, but they're not that serious, which means that they can be dealt with, because they can be dealt with like all the time, constantly, right, in the very, very lower courts, in the 100 courts or whatever. It means that when the MP has finished doing his elected duty, right? When the MP has finished his elected duty through this period, if it's a minor offence, it was never that serious to have urgency to prosecute while they were serving because they're elected, their power's invested in them, right? It also means that when we get to these red areas at the between sessions, because the lower courts are running all the time, right, they can just go straight into the lower courts, right? Because they're running through the recess period, right? They're running constantly all the time, right? Now, the if it's a serious offence, okay, if it's a serious offence which is dealt with at a court of record, which was a felony, or the perjuries and other ones, which could have been dealt with by Parliament, remember, treason, felony, perjury and so forth could be prosecuted by Parliament anyway, right? And usually had to be. But these more serious crimes like felonies, right? Now, if it clearly states that you're never under arrest while there's a Parliament session. Never. And you're never put in prison, right? Until you're not an MP anymore or in between sessions, even if it's sentenced. Now, for the very serious offences, right? For these serious offences, which are dealt with by courts of record, which were either quarter sessions or assizes, right? You could only hear them on certain times of the year anyway, depending on in the area, right? Because the quarter sessions, is that's in the name, quarter, there's 4 a year, right? Now, if you are an MP, right, and you commit a crime here, right? Now, if they waited, right, until the end of the session gap, right, at the end, I'll get this little blue marker in the bottom corner, right, there. If you have it there, right, there's not going to be a court of record session necessarily because they're spaced out, right? So you can't time it for between sessions, okay? So you can't do all your proceedings after because it does not fit with the assizes and quarter sessions, right? Does not fit with them, right? But it would if it was a small offence because the hundreds courts are running all the time, right? And that is why you are allowed, or you were allowed, in a court of record for the felony or serious offence to initiate during Parliament session time. That's why you could initiate it during Parliament session time. Because even there's no quarter session or assizes necessarily meeting conveniently with the prorogation or end of session, right? Okay? It's not going to fit. So you can bring the charges, question them, they can be called to court or send a representative for them, and they can be tried and even convicted, but they will not go to prison if they're convicted. And they cannot be arrested either. You can question them, obviously, but you can't place them under arrest, right? Or put any conditions on them. No police conditions, because they're completely and totally free to serve their electors who voted them in through that session, right? But they've abolished felony, and it is to be regarded as misdemeanour, right? And so they can have proceedings brought against them in a court of record, which now has to be a Crown Court. That means that Crown Court proceedings can proceed during Parliament time, right? But not be arrested, or even if they get sentenced, they don't go to prison, right? Because they get to serve. Now, after Parliament is ended, if they get convicted, they can have a recall petition, right? If the people want to remove them, but that is really meant to happen after the sessions of Parliament, because they've got a legal right to serve the period that they were voted in for. So that's why, and that means that anything in a magistrates court has to wait. Anything dealt with by a magistrates court has to wait. It's not a court of recorded dialogue, right? And there was also, I can't even find where it is now in the Act. The one that actually imparts felony. But this is the one here now for court of record, right? Magistrates courts are not a court of record because the dialogue is not recorded. Things that are said, particularly when it comes to privileges claims and so forth. If you're claiming a right or privilege or trying to, it all gets recorded on dialogue, right? It doesn't in the magistrates court. So any MP who is being prosecuted in the magistrates court it cannot be prosecuted in the magistrates court during this time, right? And that's why, because it didn't fit. None of the other courts fit, and that's to do with conveniences. And then most of these other privileges acts are to do with civil suits and debts to the king, which is actually, one of them actually is quite relevant to Lord Hanningfield at the moment, because I think that evading tax might be a debt to the Crown or a debt to the King. So Jeremy Johnson, KC, you might have overlooked that act because it would suggest that owing tax money might be a debt to the Crown. So Hanningfield, and it was in a court of record, the Crown Court, so Hanningfield might not have been able to get out of that. But they didn't use any of these acts. They used the Article 9 of the Bill of Rights to argue it under there, but it specifically says that debts to the Crown, financial debts to the Crown, can be brought. So Hanningfield's would be under that act. So I don't know why Johnson ignored it. So the police magistrates court isn't allowed to proceed.